Okay, well, it's 2 o'clock, and I think we're about to get ready to get started. We have a good number on the webinar call already. So, welcome to our first webinar of 2020. Great Leadership Teams webinar series. It's the 22nd episode in our couple of years of doing this. Today's topic is kind of a cool one to get the year kicked off with, because it's really about what we work when we work with executive teams. It's sort of what we aspire for every team we work with to get to, these four features that, from our perspective, define great leadership teams. Just for a little bit of background, my name is Jack McGinnis. I'm the managing partner of Relationship Impact. We're a consulting firm that's been around for a little over 10 years now, and our focus is exclusively working with the executive and leadership teams of growing companies, we call them, small to mid-sized companies. And I'd say over the past 10 years, Gil and I have worked with somewhere around 100, maybe a little bit more than 100 teams across a host of industries, from small, fast-growing companies to, associations to large multinational companies, although our focus with large multinationals has sort of diminished over the few years out of personal preference more than anything. And, it's interesting. At the start of every engagement, we ask every team that we work with a simple question to ponder on. And it's very simple. It's just, tell us what are some of the characteristics of some of the best teams you've ever been on. Could be a sports team, a community team, a business team, even a team that you coach. And define what are some of the characteristics, and really get to, tell us a little bit about how it felt to be on a team like that. And so over the last 10 years, we've obviously had some really interesting discussions about this topic, but there's a few common things that emerge from that. Words like trust, communication, accountability, common goals, respect, innovation. Words like that kind of make every list. And what we really enjoy is sort of the passion that emanates from asking that question. You can see people's faces. Most people, some people have had the misfortune of never having worked on a great team, but those that have, you can see the passion in their face, and the sort of the light bulbs going on, and the hands getting raised. And here's a few of the quotes we've pulled just from some of the work we've done over the last few months. It was all about trust, as we always had each other's backs, even when things didn't go so well, right? And so when we didn't let stuff get in the way, even when things were going bad, we figured it out. The path wasn't always clear. We always have a great plan, but the path, as we know, plans are only as good as the paper they're on, oftentimes. And but we knew we were heading in the right direction, and we were confident that we could get there. We were confident in each other and the team as a whole. Everyone pulled their weight. We just didn't want to let anyone down, each other down. And back to this whole point around, we screwed things up, because you will, and nothing's perfect. And so how do you manage things when you screw them up? We didn't point fingers. We just fixed the problem, learned, and did our best not to mess up again, right? And so these are some of the feelings you get from being on a great team. And so what I'm about to talk to you about today, this is going to be one of our shorter webinars, because I'm really not going to give a lot on the how to build the great team talk. I've done a lot about that. We've done a lot about that on that topic over the last 21 episodes. This is really more of a feel good of what to aspire to. What can a great team look like, and what are the characteristics, and what did those characteristics feel like? And so I'm going to jump right to sort of the answer. What are those 4 features? The first is a results focus. And I'll talk specifically about each one of these in a little bit greater detail, but a laser focus on results. The second is, this is kind of like an Army term or a military term. There's oftentimes a weapon system or communication system that's deployed in a military theater that can serve as what they call a force multiplier effect or a synergistic effect. And from our perspective, great teams have this force multiplier effect. It's intangible. It's hard to measure, but you know it when you get there. The sum of all the individual contributions are not as great as the team as a team. And then the team's ability to manage increasing complexity as their organization faces new and greater challenges becomes a strong capability. And perhaps one of the more important things is, and as some of the quotes got to in the first slide, this sense of resilience, the ability to get back on the horse when you fall off it. And with, not pointing the finger at the horse either. So results focus, this force multiplier effect, the ability to manage increasing complexity and resilience. So let's dive in. One of the things I didn't talk about to start, and I should have started off with, if you have any questions during the course of the presentation, please just use the chat feature and I will get to your questions as soon as I possibly can when I see the little hand go up. So let's talk a little bit about results focus and what we mean by that. And this, the question is, why is it that so many leadership teams take their eye off the ball and let seemingly trivial issues or lack of discipline get in the way, right? And so when we talk about results focus, what we're really talking about is the simple fact that great teams, most of the time, not all the time, because you're dealing with human beings, of course, but most of the time, great teams do not let trivial issues get in the way of what's most important. And so I will give you a few examples now of things I've heard that qualify as trivial, at least from my humble perspective. First, one client I dealt with a year or so ago changed up their snacks in the snack room and to more healthy snacks. And this became an issue of conversation at the executive team level for several meetings until someone finally just said, we'll put 2 sets of snacks, healthy. And I know that sounds like a silly issue, but I'm telling you, that's a microcosm of much larger problems. What are some other trivial issues that we hear? We've heard everything from the snacks to who gets to sit where at the offsites. Just stupid things like that are getting in the way. Those are obviously extreme, stupid examples, but I'm sure if I was to ask you now, you could pull from your experience, what are some of the silly things that you wind up focusing on that are really not something that leadership or executives teams should be keeping their eye on. And so from our perspective, there's 2 things that limits or gets in the way or contributes to a leadership team's inability to really focus on results. And there are 2 sides of this. There's one, and if you've heard any of our webinars before, our point of view is that building a great leadership team, building any team really, but building a great leadership team, there's 2 sides of a coin. the first side is structural dynamics and the other side is relational dynamics. So ineffective relational dynamics, meaning there's lack of trust on a team, or lack of people making the people making assumptions about each other on teams that may or may not be, and most often are not true, can lead to taking your eye off the ball and letting stupidity get in the way of what's most important. Structural things, poor structural dynamics that can get in the way are things like if there's a poorly defined decision-making process, right? And I was just with a client during the course of this week, and one of the things they said is that they have pretty clearly defined decision-making process when the CEO gets to decide, when the team gets to have input, and when they want to have consensus. But that policy or approach is inconsistently applied, and so you can imagine how a well-intended process like that, used ineffectively, can contribute to people saying, well, this is just stupid. Why are we putting our time and effort into this process if it's not going to be used? And so the poor structure and ineffective poor relationships can lead to a focus or an ineffective focus on results. So we have a question here, and I'm going to pull that question up real quick if I can. Bear with me here, Q&A. Someone raised their hand, and I can't see it anymore. So if you want to just go to the Q&A feature and type in your question, and I'll try to answer it. Okay, so sorry, let me get off of that. So the best teams that we work with do not let trivial issues most of the time get in the way of their focus on what's most important. And I say most of the time because there's no perfect team, and sometimes things are just going to get in the way. But most of the time, you're not letting these trivial stuff. They're just to focus on what's most important, and we're attacking that. And so the comments below, acknowledge, reflect, and commit. It's just some words we use when things like this are happening. First of all, as executive team coaches, we try to gently and politely call out and you say, are you sure you really want to be focused on this topic? Is this really, and what is getting in the way of you? Why is this becoming most important? And how do we get beyond dealing with the snacks and move to what's most important? And so, as in most things, there has to be an acknowledgement that, yeah, we are dealing with some trivial stuff, and we're not going to let we're going to spend some time thinking about what's getting in the way. So a little reflection by each party on the team, each team member, and then an acknowledgement that, yeah, there is some underlying stuff getting in the way. It could be, the HR person who put the policy in place. This is just a microcosm of him not communicating effectively on important stuff as well. So the snacks became a more important thing than they needed to actually be. And so, just having the discussion that needs to be had around, this is not really about the snacks. It's about the fact that, we have a challenge with how we communicate things that are actually important, and a commitment on both parties or the parties on the team to say, hey, when we see stuff like this, we're gonna talk about it, and we're not gonna spend our time talking about the cake. We're gonna talk or the snacks. We're gonna talk about the stuff that's most important. And as as the person that's communicating, I'm going to commit to doing a better job of getting folks engaged in and the important stuff, for example. So that's an example of results focus. So force multiplier effect. Force multiplier effect, as I talked about, is sort of like the ability, when the individuals on the team are much better than just the team itself is better than any of the individual contributions of any one person. Force multipliers are kind of like tools that amplify an effort so that much more can be produced. And recognizing that leadership teams set the tone for their organization, so their ability to cascade, and model good behaviors and good practices down to the rest of the organization are really important. So, and the ability for an executive team or leadership team to be a force multiplier is huge. And so great leadership teams, recognize that their value lies on the complementary skills and talents that people bring to the table. And they're able to harness the talents in the interest of getting the results they're looking for. And so there's a few common things that fall out of this definition, right? There's this sense of complementary skills, right? Every leadership team has different folks on the team that come to the table with different experiences, different capabilities, different education, different learnings, different life experiences. And rather than put those experiences, diversity of skills aside, we're great teams that are really demonstrating this force multiplier effect are able to leverage these complementary capabilities, talents, and skills. And they proactively look to leverage those things. And I'll give you an example of that. So there are plenty of teams that we work with, the executive team, where most of the members on the team are, sort of type A, aggressive, assertive folks that are just interested in getting stuff done. And that is awesome. However, sometimes what's missed on teams like that is the analytics or the focus on, have we thought about how this is going to impact our staff or our people? And so teams that recognize that they have a preponderance of, sort of aggressive folks might just simply pull from the folks on the team that might have more, analytics, or might have more what we call people type of skills. And so it's really leveraging the full breadth of talents and not just assuming that everyone, the assertive aggressive is the way we're going to operate. Common purpose is huge. I've talked a lot in previous webinars about what I mean by common purpose, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it today, but common purpose goes beyond mission and strategy of an organization and really focuses on what is it that this executive team should be focused on as a team and attacking together over the next 6, 12, 18 months, that is going to be able to help us leverage the talents and skills of the people on the team can be leveraged. So common purpose is important. We see many leadership teams really serving as information sharing and report out vehicles, or what we've called staff teams versus leadership teams. And, where people just go around the room, share their experience, share what they're working on, share what they're about to do. And that's fine construct. But from our perspective, the greatest teams that we've worked with or helped are those that gain a collective sense of what should we be using our talents to work on together to move towards our mission, to help address our strategy. And the third piece of a force multiplier effect is a set of shared behaviors. We've referred to these as operating principles before. Others refer to them as, common values or behaviors. In effect, it's how are we going to operate together as a team? And that can be anything, and it's really typically the things that are getting on our way, the little things behaviorally that are getting in our way, little and big things. Can range anything from, we don't have a lot of discipline in terms of how we use technology in meetings. So we're going to throw our phones in a basket before we go in a meeting. And that could be one behavioral principle. The second one could be on the more extreme side, or the more serious side would be, we have a habit of talking bad about each other outside of the construct of our team. And we're going to decide not to do that anymore. If we have anything to say to each other, we're going to say it to each other directly, or at least in the team setting. And so those are what I'm talking about, shared behavior, with shared behaviors. And it's these combination of leveraging our talents and skills towards a common purpose with a set of behavioral principles that helps teams be better than the individual contributions of any one team member. Any questions so far? Again, I told you this was going to be more of a, what do we want teams to look like versus what do we do to get there? Next, great teams have an ability to handle increased complexity over time. And my partner Gil pulled this definition from a guy, he's a PhD. He pulled this in some of his research. He pulled out this definition from a guy named Ralph Stacey. And we thought it was a great sort of quote that really supports our point of view on what great leaders and great leadership teams need to have, right? Great leaders have the capacity to live with the anxiety of not knowing and not being in control while interacting creatively and productively, right? And obviously that's an extreme, not knowing. You got to know something, right? But what it basically means is that we have all this information coming at us every day. We have dynamic market environments that we work in. And so we can't know everything. We certainly, as individual leaders on teams, can't be in control of everything. And so from our perspective, teams that are able to have that force multiplier effect are able to leverage the talents and capabilities and skills of each team member, are able to deal more creatively and productively in the face of lack of information, in the face of not being able to control everything. And so that's why we use that definition. We think it's a good one. And so what are the things that help great teams deal with complexity? Well, from our perspectives, there's a couple. The first is that they're great at integrating their roles. And let me tell you a little bit more what I mean about that. And so we talked about two sides of the great leadership team coin, right? Structural side and the relational side. Well, role integration is a really important and often left out discussion on most of the leadership teams that we have encountered. And what I mean by, most functional leaders understand what their roles are. The CFO understands what he or she is supposed to do. The chief marketing officer, same. Manufacturing, same. Down the line. Where we find that teams and organizations, but it starts with the leadership team often, where they get themselves in trouble, is that there's not a healthy discussion about the integration of roles and what the gray areas are between roles and how we're going to deal with those gray areas, particularly when the stuff hits the fan, when it gets hard, when it gets complex. So I was having a great conversation yesterday with a client of mine who is the senior vice president of marketing. And I won't bore you with all the details, but there was a discussion she was having with the chief or the operations VP about some letters she was supposed to be sending out to investors. And her role was to craft a great letter, send it out without any mistakes in it, get the message across. And she needed data from, she needed it sliced a bunch of different ways from the operations folks that manage the data. And when she asked for that, she got, well, that's not really, we don't have data scientists. That's not really my role. So you're going to have to deal with what we give you. And that may or may not be the case, but the fact that they didn't talk about how are we going to deal with this, this gray area between our roles, who's going to, organize the data in a way that someone can actually send it out in a meaningful way. With no mistakes to the right people, all that kind of stuff. And so in this case, it was sort of thrown over the transom and it fell back on her role as the one that was throwing it out. And now I'm not arguing one way or the other. Should it be her role? Should it have been his role? What I am saying is that there's clearly a black hole there. There's a lack of clarity around who should be doing what. And that's a small example. It just came up yesterday, so I'm using it. But there are many examples in the work that we do with teams where that's where a lot of the trust and relationship issues get mired in this, well, I thought you were doing that, or I thought that was your department's role, or I assume that that was our department's role, and we're both duplicating effort now. And so you get the sense of, it's just, and oftentimes these are not, they don't have to be overly complicated discussions. They just simply have to be, what is Department A's role? What is Department B's role? Where do we feel like some gaps exist in terms of where we integrate most, first of all, and then where are some of the potential pitfalls we might have in terms of how we integrate, and how we should be integrated, I guess is a better way of putting it. So discussions around integrating at a senior leadership team level, we find are important discussions to have and reduce some of the unnecessary back and forth, and we diminish some of the relational challenges that that often come up on leadership teams. The second piece is, so great at integrating rules and truly understand what trust means. And so this is I have a couple of webinars devoted to trust. And what I really mean by this is that what we find is that trust is a word that's often used too loosely, and it's thrown around because of how when one party sees another party behaving differently than they might behave, then they make assumptions that says, well, that person's lazy, or that person's a steamroller, or that person's just arrogant. When in fact, that may be true, it often isn't the case. And so what we do is we build up walls around us with those assumptions, and it's really not necessarily, we assume that there's lack of trust rather than digging into when I'm seeing that behavior, let me get a little bit more curious about what's behind that behavior. And so I'll give you another example of this. Worked with another client recently who had, excuse me, they're going through a merger, and there's obviously a lot of work to be done during a merger, and happened to be over the Thanksgiving, right after the Thanksgiving holiday, it was closing. And so there's a lot of work, communications, dealing with people, dealing with, operations, converting systems and all that kind of stuff. And a couple of people had vacations at that point. One of them was an operations person that had some, clear responsibilities, that was, had some, good people working for them, but they were going on vacation during the Thanksgiving holiday. And, during normal times, that's no problem, but during a merger, having a senior leader out can cause some folks some anxiety. And so they felt like they had everything covered. And in the end, they pretty much did. There's always hiccups, right? But what happened was you had another VP who was in charge of customer service that was really anxious about the fact that all the operational stuff may not be handled. And so she's calling him on vacation, she's sending him emails and text. And so, the behavior that they each saw from each other was, well, this person doesn't trust me because she keeps calling me. And the behavior that the customer service person saw was, hey, this person doesn't care because he's on vacation. When in fact, neither one of those things are really true. And what really could have happened to diminish the blow-ups that they had are just, okay, I know the customer service person is a little anxious about how the service is going to take place. I'm going to make sure that she's comfortable with me going on vacation, number one. I'm also going to communicate to her a plan of attack on how I'm going to deal with any issues that come up while I'm on vacation, including, a daily call or potentially, a ticket that I can get home in a quick period of time, whatever it might be. But just having some planning and having discussions up front and understanding that there might be some trepidation. So I hope you understand what I'm getting. I'm getting a little long-winded on that example, so I apologize for that. But don't assume that all relational issues are trust issues, because we see that quite often. And the trust, when trust really breaks down, it's really hard to repair. So really making sure that we're being curious about the behaviors we're seeing and anticipating the potential behaviors of someone else when things get hard. Any questions about that? That's a tough concept sometimes to get, but in terms of an ability to manage complexity, you got role integration is really having some healthy discussions about role integration, and then really, getting out in front of potential trust issues is really important. And so for more information on trust, please go to my website, which you'll see at the end of the presentation. You'll see some more. And what I'll do is I'll put link in here when I send out the presentation to previous webinars. That'll be a good idea, so that you have links back to those other webinars or articles. So that's about managing complexity. And the last piece, which we think is really, really crucial, and when we see teams that are able to get back up on the horse after they fall down, we know that they're doing well, right? They're doing, or at least they're doing much better, right? So first of all, really important, this is a great quote that I stole from a World War II, I can't remember his name, but a World War II general. Gil and I were both in the military for a short period of time, so we're sort of military people, and and this has been Gil's mantra for a long time. It's, no battle plan survives first contact with the enemy. He also says any plan will do, because having a plan is at least getting us set in the right direction. But no battle plan survives contact with the enemy, meaning, nothing goes perfect. No team is perfect all of the time. And all of those other things, the force multiplier effect, the ability to deal with complexity and learn from it, and the ability to set aside trivial junk, all of those things help us build the resilience we need to help teams have confidence in their ability to get back in sync. And so there's a few things that go along with this whole resilience concept, other than the other three features of great leadership teams. One is this whole concept of a greater good mindset, right? And we believe that every member of a leadership team has two roles. The first is my functional role that I come to. I'm the chief marketing officer, I'm the VP of finance, whatever it might be. But they also have a organization or a leadership team role or a cross organizational role. And great leadership teams have members that put that greater good, the good of the organization, the good of our leadership team ahead of the good of just my function. It's an art, not a science. There's a healthy balance that needs to be had there. And obviously there has to be really strong relationships, trusting each other's character and your competence of your teammates, to be able to get to that greater good mindset. But that mindset needs to be talked about. That fact, the simple fact that leadership team members come to their leadership teams with two roles should be at least talked about. The fact that sometimes you're going to have to make sacrifices in your function for the good of the organization. That could be resources, it could be spotlight, it could be a whole host of things. And that is not an easy thing to build towards, but is an incredibly important thing if you're going to have resilience. Psychological safety. Again, I think we've written an article on this and having had some discussions on our webinars about this as well. But psychological safety is an overused term probably at this point. And it's been around for a long time, but made really popular by the study that Google did on what makes great teams at Google. And the number one thing was what was called psychological safety. Is a lot written about this. And again, I'll put a link in here to a webinar or a TED Talk by Amy Edmondson, who coined the term psychological safety. But psychological safety is pretty much team members feel comfortable being able to raise difficult topics without judgment or without fear of retribution. Again, really easy to say. Sometimes that's not easy to do because the environment that's built is one of don't rock the boat, or you're just a naysayer, or you're just a, you're negative Nelly or whatever it might be, versus really just saying, hey, I'm just raising a challenge here. I might be wrong, but I'm raising a challenge. I'd like us to talk about it a little bit. It could be as simple as, I think I'll go back to the decision-making thing. We've spent a lot of time on our decision-making process, and I feel that we're not applying that decision-making process very well. That could be, and that sounds very simple and easy to say, but on some teams that would be really hard to say because the CEO or others on the team that might just get their backs up and say, well, we are applying a safety, rather than saying, tell me more about what you mean by that. What does it look like when we're not applying? And so I might find out that I brought that topic up, and you know what? I'm wrong. And oftentimes I'll bring that topic up, and if I'm listened to and heard, others might say, you know what? You might have a point there. We might need to tweak that a little bit. Psychological safety is huge. Having the ability to be having a team that has confidence in their ability to be resilient cannot happen without psychological safety. The last thing, and this is sort of a tactical thing, and we talked about it a little bit earlier, I think, and excuse me, when I talked about shared behaviors. This really calls out those shared behaviors. When teams don't have to look at their set of shared behaviors, let's look back at shared behavior number 3. We're not going to talk at each other outside of team meetings. I'm being facetious, but when teams just understand inherently what the behaviors are and how the behaviors, what behaviors are expected of each other, from everything from throwing the phone in the basket to not talking about each other, to actually listening, being curious when others talk, to following through when we're asked to follow through on something, to communicating ahead of time when we're going to be late for something, all those types of things. When teams have a sense for how they operate together, they're much more likely to have confidence in their ability to get back in sync. And so that's all I got for you today. There's a few final thoughts here. First, we believe, and obviously we're biased because this is what we do every day. We work with executive teams. We believe that leadership teams are an important vehicle for enabling their organizations to thrive. And we also believe that great teams can be accelerators, particularly those that have that force multiplier impact, can accelerate the performance of their organizations. But unfortunately, leadership teams can get in their own way and hold progress back. In our opinion, best teams we have seen and worked with have established the fiber and the accountability structure between team members that helps them focus and be able to realize these 4 features of great leadership teams. That of not letting the trivial get in the way of the important, being able to be better as a group of 6 or 7 or 8 than just the individual contributions of any one team member. An ability to deal with increasing complexity, and finally, a sense of resilience. So I hope this has been helpful for you. This was sort of a feel-good presentation on what you should aspire from our perspective, what leadership teams should aspire to be, and what it would look like if they're great. These are 4 features that we see in the work that we do every day that really can help teams be the best they possibly can be. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer any of them. I don't see any open questions. I'm happy to answer them. If not, next steps, I will send out a link to a page on our website that has these slides, a summary of the slides, and a link to a forthcoming article in Chief Executive Magazine on this same topic. I thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing you on our next webinar, which will be on February 26th, and it's entitled Tapping into a Team's Hidden Reserve. Okay, we do have one question here. Let's